Hi everyone, it's Albert Kiefer, and this time I want to take you along with a process that I am, well, not developing, but something that I've been doing lately, and that is actually designing the sketch that I'm working on or that I want to make. And I just want to run through one of the examples of that. In this case, I have an image from EBA118. It's one of my photographers on Instagram, and he makes really nice photographs, lots of them in Okinawa. And in this case, as you can see, it's not really houses that he did, but there's a twist on that. But I really loved the foliage, the tree, and that's something that inspired me to work on a sketch. And I got an idea, and I want to show you how I started working on that and preparing it before I started to sketch. For me, this is a really nice, fun part. It is absolutely not necessary to do it this way, but for me, it's like really a nice, special thing I can look forward to when I start designing a sketch. So let's see how that works. In this case, here you can see the original photograph, and I loved the tree that he had. And that is something that I wanted to play in my sketch. I'm just looking at the menu because as you can see, I'm in Photoshop right now, so that's why I have to fiddle around something in the menus. Okay, what you see here is basically the big shape of the tree, and that's really a very large blob, but an interesting one. I like this thing, and I liked the bench. What I didn't like was this bench, and I didn't like all the distracting stuff over there. So that's stuff that I wanted to get rid of. And so I went to a stage where, and there's usually something that I do a lot. If I want to isolate in my mind how things start to look, this is the way to do it for me. Again, this is not something that you have to do, but for me, this is a fun process. And since I'm a digital artist as well, it also gives me time to train my Photoshop skills. So that's a nice extra for me. Here you can see that I've isolated the tree, and I've isolated the bench. And from there on, I start sculpting or placing the stuff. Again, this for me is not something that has to be like a finished piece, because it's not, and it will never be. It will be the starting point of this particular sketch, which was called Stuck. And yeah, like I said, I want to show you the process and how the idea finally came along. Okay, so from this, where I isolated the tree and the bench from the background, I went on and thought maybe it's a cool idea to have a little kid looking up at the tree. And so I added this kid. It's a little bit of photo bashing and a little bit of painting, because the original person looked straight ahead, and that's something that I didn't. I wanted him to look up to the tree because it's so overarching, so overhanging, and that's something that I thought, okay, this little guy would be nice if he looked up at the tree. So I painted that in. From there, I started fiddling around. As you can see, I also switched the bench a little bit to the left. And then I thought, okay, if he's looking up, why not give him something to look up to? So that's when I thought, okay, let's put in a red balloon, which would be very nice contrasting against this greenish kind of tree. And so I put that in, and I put in the rope or the little thread that is connected to the balloon just outside of reach of the little kid, which made it even more like, okay, something is stuck up there, he's looking at it and he can't reach it. But if he would take the bench, that would be a solution to his problem. So that's what the final image was. And since I try to also go like try and add character and story to some of my images, I thought, okay, there's a little guy, why not give him like something of a dog? And since I am a house sketcher, it would also be cool to introduce something of a tree hut, access to the tree hut by this little stairs. So I give him a little dog. Dog also looks up, so that gives a nice way of like these two characters looking up at the balloon and yeah, wondering how they could solve this problem, the red bench, and also like adding this tree house and with this little stair leading up to the tree house. So that was basically what I did, going from start, like this photograph, to the final piece, or the final starting point for me actually, which was this. So I remodeled the tree, I replaced or relocated some elements, I got rid of the bench over here because yeah, it was distracting and I didn't need it. I got rid of all the other distracting elements and finally came to this starting point for me to start to sketch. So now let's head over to the sketch that I made. Since a couple of months, well, basically I think it's now a little bit over a year, I started putting line sketches and color sketches on my Patreon account. And since this is also something that I will be sharing on Patreon for the ones that support me there, this is one of the sketches. This is one of the projects that I shared there, and I share both a line sketch and a color sketch. What you see here is the line sketch. So before this, I just went ahead and make a line sketch and immediately start coloring. So now I have to interrupt the process and yeah, do a line scan first on my scanner and then take it back and start coloring. The nice thing about that is that I have two aligned drawings, two aligned pictures, which match together perfectly to show both the line sketch and then finally the colored one. So here you see the line sketch and you can see exactly what I did. And let me explain some of the thoughts or some of the processes, the thinking behind my sketch and how I sketch. As you all know, the squiggly, wriggly, loose way of sketching that I do, that's very important to me. I do a lot of precise work, and for me this is, well, a relaxation. So I like to keep this very loose. I don't want to slow down too much, and if I would draw all the leaves, that would be something that I don't want to do. Like, let me paint in some red here on a new layer. I would not want to like try and make all these leaves because that would slow down the process a lot, and I don't want to do that. You see me using thick and thin lines. Sometimes I add the thicker lines after I colored, and the reason why is not that I want to be expressive after the fact. Sometimes it can be an accentuation, but one of the more important reasons is that if I do it before I start coloring, the thicker lines will somehow still be a little wet and I get a lot of dirty smearing, and I don't want that. So I start with the really light lines, keep in mind where I want to accentuate forms, and then go to the colored version. Also here, and that's something that I can point out in this sketch as well, is what you see me do, and that's always on purpose, is I don't want straight stuff in a sketch which can make it stiff. So if I would make like a ladder and I would make that very straight, that would be very clinical and stiff and technical. So what I do is make these lines. I don't really care how they go, but purposely not align them together. I could probably make it much straighter if I wanted to. This is freehand as well, but I don't like this. I like this much more, and that's what you see here in the image in my line sketch, that I really zigzag almost these threads onto these vertical lines, which are also not straight. And also here, like this, well, symbolically wooden fence here, it's also something that I just write. Let me see, I write this thing and I purposely keep it not straight. So from this one, let me do that with a little dramatic special effects, because then we can go to the color one. I make my color sketch. Obviously it doesn't go that as fast as this, but that's a nice little simple Photoshop trick, so why not? So here we have it. Here you have my color sketch, and what you basically see is that it is mostly quite simple. I just have like 3 shades of green, a very light, a medium, and a dark, a shadow kind of green. Same for the kid. I have like a lighter red, a little bit of a medium darker red, and at some dots an even more dark red. For the dog, 2 colors. Actually, yeah, like 2 colors, 2 values, like a little bit light and a darker. And if you think about the sun position, or if you think about lighting, if the sun comes from that direction, this would catch the light, and this side would catch the darker values. Same here. If this is an overhung roof, this side would catch light and this here would be in shadow, and if this is an overhanging total roof, this one would catch shadow as well. And that's what you see. You see the light sides, and you see the dark side here as well. There's dark underneath this whole volume. So, and since this is below the tree, and that you can see that, imagine that this tree is think for the moment that's like a mushroom shape, so it's overarching in all directions. The stem would be almost completely in shadow. I don't want to make it completely dark, because then there would be no definition in it, and it's always nice to have something of a definition. That's also why I don't ever use black as a color. I use black for my lines, and you can see, and that's the nice thing in working here, showing the sketch in Photoshop, is that I both can do a lot of this and I can also zoom in. So here you can see the sketch in a higher resolution as something, because this is actually, yeah, it's like a size A5, so it's pretty small in real life, but I can zoom in and I can show the individual marks. I can also show, like here, how this house is built up of a couple of shades, a couple of warm shades and a couple of cool shades in the shadow, in the shaded areas. Here you can see my white highlighter. Also here, what I explained, like you see that this purposely sketched crooked way of making these marks for the fence, and here as well. That makes it much more alive. It doesn't have to be like precise, because the human imagination is quite capable of figuring this all out and making this a really wonderful picture in your mind as well. Here you also see I not only use a white highlighter. As you can see, white is, well, a relative term, because here, especially if you zoom in, you see that it's actually a bit transparent. I don't think that there's ever going to be a really perfectly crisp white, and that's not necessary, because that also would kill and it would kill a lot of dimensionality, and you don't want to have that in your drawing, because it needs to be integrated. And here you can also see this integration where I paint these strokes first, but then afterwards I go over it with, like in this case, with this 50 or 60% cool gray, in this case, cool gray marker. You can see it switching over here, but it covers some of the white, which also, and here the same thing, it swishes over here and it covers some of the white portions and gives it depth. So some parts are in shadow and some parts are in light. And that's what in my course on Domestika I call touching back or touching down, to push back some of the whites and integrate them more into the sketch. You see it here, you see that as well. And here underneath the bench you see that as well. It's not an exact science, or I don't want to make an exact science of it, because here you can see that sometimes it's lighter than it's supposed to be, but yeah, I don't really care. I mean, like I said, it's not an exact science, and I don't want to make it like a scientifically correct lit image. I want it to be as spontaneous or expressive as possible. And that's what you see as the final result. For those on Patreon, you can have the month of, I believe, April has this sketch called Stuck in their portfolio. Some of them have only the color one, but the higher tiers have the line sketch and the color sketch as well. So you can experiment, and together with this walkthrough you can see what maybe you can do with it. So that's it. I hope you also enjoy the way that I explained this drawing, not by pointing to my sketchbook and showing it there, but bringing the final sketch into Photoshop together with the line sketch, and this way going much more detailed into how I make a sketch. Just a final piece, because I realized I didn't actually say it. I got distracted and started explaining about the touching down. Here you see that apart from a white Posca, Uni Posca, I also use a yellow one, and the yellow one actually is very nice because it looks greenish anyway, so I can add a couple of highlight leaves, or yeah, suggest a couple of leaves in some spaces that don't like really jump out at you, and that is with the yellow Uniposca. So that was it for this explanation, for this walkthrough of my sketch. I hope you liked it, and I see you in the next one. Bye bye.